Ah, remember when applications used to come in a box? Happy memories. Oh well. Anyway, in this episode, there are a number of questions on the A+, troubleshooting scenarios, that discuss issues that are application specific. So I want to talk a little bit about application troubleshooting. Now, there's 4 of these, and I'm just going to grab them in no particular order. So let's start with missing DLL. Missing DLL means that your executable program cannot find a dynamic link library. DLLs are nothing more than repositories of subroutines that are all stuffed into a single file. Windows and every Windows application I know of lives heavily on DLLs. So let me get started by showing you a DLL. So if you take a look over here, I'm on my C drive, and in this case I'm going to go over to Program Files, and I'm going to open up 7-Zip. 7-Zip is a very, very popular compression, uncompression tool. And if you take a look in here, you'll see I have executables, but do you see all these DLLs? Without those DLLs, the 7-Zip program simply isn't going to work. Now, applications certainly use DLLs, but I want to show you another big pile of DLLs, and that's in Windows. So down here in System 32, this is such a big, look at all these billions. There's a DLL. There's a DLL. Look, I'm only a third of the way through. Here, let me go down to the bottom. There's even more DLLs. So the Windows operating system itself uses DLLs like crazy. DLLs are important. So if you get a missing DLL error, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to research it, because malware loves to pop up missing DLL errors. In fact, if you get a missing DLL error and it's even got a link, click here to get the new one, you probably don't have a missing DLL, you probably have malware. Now, assuming you've checked that out and you know that the DLL you're missing is legit, the first thing you're going to want to do is run SFC with the Scan Now switch. Running the System File Checker allows Windows to check its DLLs to make sure if you have a built-in DLL that comes with a Windows operating system, it will make sure that they're okay, and it will automatically replace any that are bad. So at least for the Windows system, SFC will take care of that. Now let's say you run SFC and you still got the problem. Well, now what you're talking about is you've probably installed some kind of application and it's missing the DLL. The first thing and the best thing you can possibly do is just try reinstalling the application. If you've downloaded something from the internet, well, download it again and try the installation again and see if that gets it. If that doesn't get it, well, what you're running into is a very common issue that we have, and that is when someone creates a new program, they use a compiler that uses C++ or, heaven forbid, Visual Basic. And when you run these, when you make the programs, when you compile it and turn it into an exe file, these compilers will also come with a few DLLs, and that's pretty standard. The problem with this is that these get updated. There's been a number of different versions of the C++ compiler over the years, and sometimes some of these base DLLs get changed. Or heaven forbid you install a program that needs a newer version and it erases the old version. In those cases, probably the best thing you can do if a reinstallation doesn't fix it is to go find yourself a DLL repository. There are lots of websites out there that will always give you a new DLL. Now, there's also a lot of websites out there that are malware, so I am not going to name any names here. What you're going to do is you're going to do some good research. You're going to look for that DLL missing, then type in the name of your DLL. You're going to find lots of forums out there that will point you to good, trusted DLL repositories. Download it, and you should be in good shape. Now, keep in mind that in some cases, Windows needs you to actually register a DLL. And in that case, we have a wonderful program called regserver32. Looks like this. And you just type the name of the program, you type regserver32 and then the name of the DLL, and Windows in essence puts it into the registry so any program can access it. So that should fix most of your missing DLL errors. One more thing to keep in mind. Even when you download a DLL from a trusted source, make sure your anti-malware programs are running. You never know where those sneaky guys can come in. if you ever get a missing service or service not started type of error, well, the first thing you're going to have to do is check in services and make sure the thing's running. So head over to your services, find the particular service that's of issue, and turn the thing on. Now, if that fixes it, great, but after a reboot and you suddenly see that it's not on again, you might want to run over to msconfig and make sure that it is turned on in your actual startup itself. If that doesn't fix the problem, you probably are going to have to reinstall whatever application brought those services on board. If that doesn't fix it, well, I'm afraid you've got a big issue. There could be an incompatibility with Windows or something else that's going on that's going to be causing a bigger problem, and you're going to have to do a little research to figure out how to fix that particular issue. Okay, the next error I want to talk about is the infamous compatibility error. Windows has been around for a long time, and so have Windows applications. Applications are written with a certain version of Windows in mind, and over time they become, well, old. And that's where compatibility issues come into play. So when it comes to compatibility, the main thing you've got to deal with is getting some way to get your new version of Windows to run an old version. Now, there are some strict limitations. For example, I've got an old DOS program for when I need to draw ANSI screens, like text screens, and it simply does not work in the newest versions of Windows. It's an old 16-bit program, and Windows has dumped that kind of stuff. But anything that was written for an old version of Windows can usually be run one way or another by taking advantage of the compatibility mode settings within Windows. For example, I've got an old copy of Paint Shop Pro here, and what I want it to do is run, it kind of runs, but I want it to run a little bit better. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right-click on this. Now, this is a shortcut here. If I apply something to the shortcut, it'll work for the executable as well. So I could go to the troubleshoot compatibility. Now, this is an automated tool, and it does a pretty good job, and a lot of times I'll try that as a first shot. So I'm going to go ahead and actually give it a whirl. It looks like it worked. Yeah, that's exciting. But that is way too easy. So what I'm going to do instead is let's take a look at it in a more manual way. Yes, thank you, troubleshooter. You took care of all my problems. If you want to handle it manually, right-click on the application that you're interested in, and don't go to the troubleshoot compatibility, go down to properties, and you'll see a compatibility tab. All right, let me pull this more towards the center so I can see what I'm doing. So if I run the compatibility troubleshooter, it's going to run exactly what we just saw. But instead, what I want to do is set this stuff up manually. So the first thing you often want to do is say, run this program in compatibility mode for whatever version of Windows you're interested in. So you can see this goes all the way back to 95. You can reduce color mode if there's a problem with color, and you'll see this in a lot of drawing programs and such where it just can't handle a more advanced color. So you basically lie to it and tell it it's running on a more primitive video card. If you have a problem with screen resolution, I've got a little program that always runs in 640 by 480. I can take care of that. Scaling on high DPI settings, you can actually reduce your DPI, your dots per inch, for old Windows applications that might need that. Run this program as an administrator, always, all the time. Be careful with that one. And enable this program to work with OneDrive files. If you actually do use OneDrive, you do have that option. That's kind of unique for Windows 8. So a lot of times for me, all I'm going to be doing is setting this first value right up at the top here, set it to an older version of Windows, and it tends to run just fine. In fact, I think that's all that the troubleshooter did. Now, that's going to take care of a lot of problems, but I'm going to warn you right now. There are a lot of programs out there that simply will not run in Windows anymore. And if that's the case, that's where virtualization comes into play. I don't care what hypervisor you use. You can use Hyper-V, or you can use a third-party tool like Oracle's VirtualBox. Virtualization is the secret to getting old programs to work because it is the ultimate compatibility. Okay, the last issue I want to talk about with applications is an easy one, and that's system lockups. Locked up? Oh my goodness! System lockups are one of the scariest things that can happen to me when it comes to working on computers. And I'm not talking about a blue screen of death or a kernel panic or an error. I'm just talking my machine has locked up cold. Now, if you're running an application and your system locks up, the first thing you need to do is say, is it the application that caused it? In general, if an application is going to cause system lockups, it will do it at roughly the same time every time. Every time on that old word processor, or I start up the spell checker, it locks up, or every time I try to save to a network location, it locks up. That is often a clue that it's the application that's causing the problem. Don't let the fact that your system has some other problem that's causing a system lockup make you blame the application. So a couple of reboots is usually all you're going to need to do to confirm that. Okay, so you've rebooted a few times, and it's clearly every time you open that application, and only that application, because you're running other stuff and it's running great, it locks up. The problem you're going to have to deal with is there's something wrong with the application. Probably the first thing I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to reboot. If I have to reboot in a safe mode to do this, I reboot in a safe mode and I uninstall the application. Now you'd think, well, just go ahead and reinstall it. No, run the computer for a little bit. With the application uninstalled, if everything's still running good, now you really know that you've got it zeroed in on the application. You can try a reinstallation, usually from a different source is always a good idea. But a lot of times where you see these system lockups from applications is somebody's writing some in-house code and they're just messing up. In that situation, especially if you can actually call the coder on the phone, you need to let somebody know that that application is causing problems. So you go ahead and reinstall the program. Now before you reinstall, there's one more thing I'd really recommend you do. Do a little research on that application. See if other people are having the same problem. We do download applications from time to time that can have an issue. Hey, it happens. But if there's a problem with the application that is systemic, that it's happening, everyone's going to be talking about it, and that is the secret you need to make sure you don't run into any more trouble. Okay. We have hit a number of different issues that you're going to be seeing on the A+. These tend to be scenario questions. So while we can't cover every possibility because no one knows what exactly the scenarios are, make sure you recognize the symptoms and some of the fixes that we discussed so that you'll be okay when you see it on the A+.